Hello everyone, my name is Rock. I am the developer of the game Tank General. This is a card game about tanks set in World War II. Currently, I have been developing it for a year and a half. I started developing it 43 years ago without any professional education, without any experience in work. I have a degree in law and have always worked as a lawyer. The result of my work can be seen behind me. Currently, I have 3 generations of nations. I have about 200 cards, about 30 headquarters, several PvE modes, and the main mode of my game is 1v1 PvP. In this video, I want to tell you how I came to such a situation in my life, what inspired me to develop a game with any game development experience, and I'll also share the mistakes I made along the way and also like to offer some advice to aspiring indie developers. I'll start with the most basic question. Is it possible to become an indie developer without any programming or game development experience? And the answer is very simple. Anyone can become an indie developer, but I heard a saying somewhere that everything said before but is crap. And in our case, the situation is exactly the same. Indeed, anyone can become an indie developer. And the very first but is incentive. And the incentive should be serious enough. It's not just a desire to try something new or trendy or cool. All of that will lead to you quickly abandoning your project because game development requires a lot of time and effort. It doesn't matter what kind of incentive it is. It can be a desire to change your job, to change your lifestyle, or maybe you have some great idea you want to bring to life. The most important thing is that this incentive is very serious, that it makes you move forward. Personally, for me, the incentive was a browser-based card game which was developed by a major company that, for some unknown reason, closed about 10 years ago. The game, in my opinion, had simply brilliant mechanics where each type of vehicle played exactly as that type of vehicle. So a light tank would spot, meaning it could drive up to the enemy, the artillery would fire on the enemy, and then the tank would drive back to its own side. The PTSAU, for example, always attacked first. If it destroyed the enemy, then it did not receive a return damage. That is, it gives the impression that this is a technique that will be from the ambush of the PTSAU. And this is exactly this mixture of tank games, which I love very much, and card games, which I also love very much, turned out simply magnificent, in my opinion. I waited 10 years for someone to release something like this. I waited, and then it came to my mind, why not try it myself? Who is interfering with me? I'd always thought about how great it would be to try developing games myself, but that was just theoretical thinking. And then I got a serious incentive and I started developing. I've been working for a year and a half and I like it and I will continue to work. Now about the second but. The development of an indie game requires one very important resource, namely time. And a lot of time. And the more difficult your project is, the more time it takes. And if you still decided, God forbid, to make a network mode, then it's just a lot of time. A lot of time. And if you have problems with this resource, then at the very least you need to simplify the project, because a complex project requires a huge amount of time. In principle, if you have successfully solved the problem with the first 2 buts, then no one prevents you from becoming an indie developer. You basically have everything for it. The only thing is the third but, which is also very important. Become an indie developer and becoming a successful indie developer are 2 completely different things. In order to become an indie developer, you need the skills of a developer. In order to become a successful indie developer, you also need the skills of a marketer, a clip maker, a streamer, and so on, and studying a huge amount of information related to game promotion. This is also a huge amount of work. Therefore, having 2 buts, you will become a developer without any problems. But how successful you will be as an indie developer, it already depends not only on your development skills. Initially, I was quite naive. I thought that it was enough to make a good game, post it on Steam, and then people will find my game and play it. But you understand how smart I was at that moment. And so we smoothly moved on to my mistakes. The biggest mistake was that I was focused exclusively on the development of the game for 1.5 years and completely neglected marketing. And when I finished the network mode, when The final point of my game was already visible. I decided to find out what to do next, and I realized how stupid I was. I ran with mad eyes to pay for Steam, register a page on Steam, and study information on marketing. And by the way, if you have watched this moment, I will be grateful if you subscribe to my game on Steam. And thank God, I haven't reached the point of no return yet. I just moved back a little in the release date of the game. And now I'm really working on the promotion of this game. My next mistake is, in principle, characteristic for many novice developers. Sounds like this. Don't start your first project by creating your dream game. I immediately started making my dream game with great enthusiasm. It would be much more correct to make one small game, or rather 2 small games, and only then tackle the game of your dreams. But keep in mind that everyone has their own personality. Personally, for me, it was the right decision, because I would just quit the project if I started initially developing the game for the future and then start making my dream game. I immediately started making my dream game and made a bunch of mistakes, but personally for me, it was the right choice. But for you, perhaps this will not be the right decision, and you need to act as more competent people advise. My third mistake, which, however, I could not avoid: do not start adding your first project to the network mode. Avoid it at all costs, because it is very difficult. It is much more difficult than just making a game. Personally, I just did not have a way out, because this is the main mode of my game, and if I don't do it, the project will not be of interest to anyone. Without online mode, my game is pointless. But I just have such a character that the more difficult it is, the more interesting it is to me. You might simply lack the energy and desire to complete it, and the project will be shelved, which is a real shame. Therefore, whenever possible, try to avoid adding your first project to the network mode. And the next mistake that I made, and which I do not advise to repeat: do not start developing your first project on the first engine you get. This is a very important point, because in your game engine you will spend a lot of time. Look at what game engines are most suitable for the implementation of your project. Lose one day, work with each engine, and only then make a conclusion. You may not enjoy working with code. There are solutions here. There are engines that support visual programming. Personally, for my project, visual programming is not suitable, but for your project, it may be quite enough. This is once again an important point. Spend time so as not to make a mistake in choosing a game engine. When analyzing data, a concept such as a survivor's mistake is used. This means that in order to obtain objective information, you need to study not only positive examples, but more importantly, negative ones. It's certainly inspiring to read and watch stories of people who achieved success. But for every successful person, there were several people who did not achieve any success with similar data. And the study of their experience is no less important. Now, I will highlight a few problems which, thank God, I avoided, but which were allowed by other developers, my colleagues. The first of the mistakes I found from one indie developer who had been making the game for 2 years, invested a lot of effort into it. He handled both marketing and the game's development. And 2 years later, he realized that no one needed it. This happened because that he took the action, roguelike genre, and transferred it to islands. That is, the battle took place on a small island, the battle ended, and player moved to the next island. But he didn't consider what new mechanics this brought to the action roguelike genre. That is, instead of expanding this genre, he reduced this genre to small islands. And this, naturally, no one wanted it. Therefore, it is quite important to understand in general whether your product will be interesting to someone. Besides the fact that I took very good ideas from a closed game, I added them to my game. Research mechanics to it, what you see now on the screen. Tank games have the same mechanics. You can take a specific vehicle card or headquarters or spells and explore it and not explore what you are not interested in. I really don't like this randomness in card games when you try to draw the card you need from the cases and fail. I think my approach is much more honest and open for me. If I can convey this information to those people who are interested in this genre, then it seems to me that they will be interested. Another mistake that many beginners make is too much focusing on some small details on the infinite improvement of the game. The game can be infinitely improved, but in my opinion, the most important thing is to implement the core mechanics and polishing. The game isn't that big a deal. Now you can see what my game looked like in the beginning. This horror could almost be called a full-fledged game because the core mechanics were implemented here. That is, the enemies already walked, the AI opponent was acting, and some abilities worked. You could even finish the fight from start to finish. And it didn't take long to polish this thing to a decent state. The main thing is that the core mechanics have already worked. I'm not calling for everyone to show the game as soon as the core mechanics are done. No, calmly finish the core mechanics and then you can bring the game to a normal state and show it to people. It's not difficult, it won't take a lot of time. The third mistake, which is often found in beginners, is an attempt to make a game with your friends. Of course, you might be lucky enough to complement each other perfectly, which will make the game's creation easier. But don't forget that this is primarily your project and it's not a fact that your friend will be just as interested in its completion. If you have friends who can help you, find something they're good at, something they love, and assign it to them. If he likes to do music, let him write music. If he likes to draw, let him draw something. But in any case, don't rely on them if they don't allow you to get involved in the project, because once again, this is your project or your interests. And now I'll give you a few tips for beginners, developers, based on my own experience, albeit limited. Don't jump right into learning the entire scope of work that lies ahead. It will simply intimidate you. Create a working algorithm and start making the game. AI will help you. And start step by step with the first basic mechanics. You'll do 1, then 2, then 3, and you'll get the hang of it. And then you won't be afraid of anything. If I knew how much work there would be, I would be afraid to take up the project. And now I already know that I can, in principle, implement almost any mechanics, and there's nothing scary about it. Recently, I watched a video of an indie developer who making an open-world game in Unreal. It may not be an open world, but it is a 3D game. And he advised aspiring developers that, in principle, it's not difficult to learn to work on Unreal. There is a free course here. There is a course here. You need to watch a video from this course. And in the end, he says, well, watch 200 to 300 video tutorials and learn how to work with Unreal. I watched all of that. And in my opinion, that's not advice, it's bad advice. If you're going to study 200 to 300 videos, you won't accomplish anything because you'll give up on the 20th or 30th lesson. It'll just be boring. It's better to just get to work right away. It's great, interesting, and inspiring. Don't be afraid, just keep working. And the second advice, if for some reason you need to add a network mode to the game, don't try to adapt the existing code for network mode. You'll probably fail. I once spent about a month and a half reworking my game for network mode, and that time simply went to waste. Until I realized I needed to start the project entirely from scratch. And don't waste time, save your time. If you need to add a network mode, start from scratch. You already have experience in creating a game. And the third advice, if you come to the conclusion that visual programming is not for you and you need to work with code, I advise you to start working with writing code. It might seem like a no-brainer. How can I do that if I don't even know how to code? Well, frankly, you don't need any skills, because if you're hoping you can code with a neural network, then you are in vain, because neural networks can only make basic games. For everything else, you need to understand how the code works. There is nothing complicated here. Find a video on YouTube of someone creating a game from scratch in a similar genre to the one you want to make. and just follow him, repeat everything, writing the code manually. After a while, you will understand how it all works, how it all interacts with each other. You will learn to eliminate basic errors, and then you will switch to working with neural networks. I've now switched to coding using neural networks, but when I started developing the game, I spent a long time writing code manually. And when I started, there was no neural network boom yet. So I was just lucky that by the time I hit a dead end with my project, neural networks were booming and I was able to continue working with them. But if I didn't have a basic knowledge, it would be extremely difficult for me because competent neural network programming is a separate field of expertise. Fourth, my advice is directly related to the previous one. Learn to work with neural networks. In today's world, for an indie developer, they're your closest friend and assistant. Closest friend and assistant. It will help you write, correct code, generate images, and write music. Just don't expect that, as I said, neural networks will do everything for you. You must know your project and your codes by heart. And if anyone says I'm not a developer because I use neural networks to write code, I'll let them be the first to throw a stone, because I not only know all my hundreds of scripts, but I also know where the necessary blocks are. Because in order to implement some kind of mechanics, you usually need to make changes to 3, 4, 5 scripts at once. And if you just feed these scripts to the neural network, it will simply spew out gibberish, which will only break the project. Therefore, you need to know your project, know where the blocks are located, which are responsible for what, and feed neural networks precisely these blocks. And for this, you need a deep understanding of your project. In fact, working with neural networks could be a whole separate video. If it is interesting, let me know in the comments and I'll film it and share my experience, giving some tips I've learned so far. Fifth advice. Before you start working, analyze whether your game has the potential to be released on platforms such as Android, iOS, and others. So you'll want to consider engines that support cross-platform play, meaning they allow you to build the project on another platform. I was lucky with Unity in this regard, as I literally only needed to change a couple of blocks in the code and that was it. And now I can basically create build for Android with just 2 clicks. Incidentally, I've uploaded my Android version of the game to Roostore for testing. I'll leave the link in the description. If you are interested, you can test it. So, pay attention to this. This is also quite important. And my last advice, learn to enjoy the process of creating a game. This is a very important point, and it will give you the strength to continue developing the game. If you've implemented a successful mechanic, then rejoice. You rejoice in the reaction of your friends to your game. You rejoice in the improvement of the visuals of your game. This is very important. This is exactly what will push you to work further and further. Remember that you are your own master. You do not work for someone's uncle. If you are tired of the development of a mechanic, then switch to the development of another mechanic and then return to the first one. You don't have to do the same thing over and over again if you're already bored. And that's really cool about creating games. By the way, I also touched the indie developer Slava Gree. Many of you probably know him. I created a page according to his lectures and signed up for Steam. According to his lectures, he did not help much. If someone miraculously watches this video, then I'll thank him very much. Well, that's all for me. If you watched this video to the end and liked my game, then you know what to do. All links are attached. Thank you all. See you soon.